Shin Godzilla is a 2016 Japanese film directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, and stars Hiroki Hasegawa, Yutaka Takenouchi, and Satomi Ishihara. It is the 31st film in the Godzilla franchise, and it's crazy to think about, and the first of the Reiwa era, and was Toho's reboot following the American Legendary Pictures reboot of 2014. And this film focuses more on the Japanese politicians trying to solve an unprecedented crisis in a bureaucratic manner. I will say this kind of thing isn't always for me, like the political thriller angle, but something about the way that it's done here, it just kept me interested the whole time, and that's kind of saying a lot. Now, as you may or may not be aware, I'm a pretty big fan of Godzilla Minus One. Loved it. It was one of my favorite films of that year, and I'm gonna try not to compare it too much to Shin, but I think it's gonna be unavoidable in at least a few cases, so maybe just be okay with it. And I actually much prefer it to Shin, to be honest, but I also feel like Shin really set the path for Minus One. Minus One was more of a reboot in a traditional sense, as to where Shin is set in modern times. And as to where Minus One focuses, more on the lives of the human characters, Shin focuses more on the Japanese politicians. And I really didn't think I'd care that much, but I actually really enjoyed, seeing things from a political point of view, and, how many debates and discussions, are behind every decision, made in a lot of modern societies. I really liked the characters. I thought they were pretty good, and the acting is very good. There aren't the standalone performances of Minus One, if you will. It's more of like a team effort. They pose so many questions and really make you feel the pressure of facing a disaster like this. And I realized so many things, that other Godzilla films didn't quite make me realize, like how Godzilla is solely the problem of the Japanese government simply because that's just where he ended up. I mean, it could have been anywhere, it could have been any country's problem, but it's Japan's. And the Japanese Congress members point out things like how if they don't successfully stop Godzilla, they will look weak to all other countries. And that's, again, just something that I have not thought about before. To add to the sad history of Japan, having historically survived devastating attacks, now facing another one, it's very much felt here, and it's pretty heavy. And as much of a fanboy as I am of Godzilla Minus One, an unashamed fanboy, I actually felt the sense of loss and sacrifice here just a little more. And I had to think about that for a while as to why I felt that way. And I think that it's because this film takes place in modern times, something that I identify with more. And I really didn't expect that because, Minus One is such a more dramatic film in tone. Then, of course, we have to talk about the look of Godzilla, right? Himself, because that's always going to be something that fans are going to be curious about, almost first and foremost. And most diehard fans, from what I've seen, seem to really love the look of Shin Godzilla. In fact, it seems to be one of their favorite designs ever, just from what I've gathered, online after reading, fan opinions over the years. And not only that, but they seem to feel like he's the most scary looking version of a Godzilla, which I'd probably also agree with. One really cool touch is that this version of a Godzilla periodically evolves and changing his look. But what I will say is that I did not expect his first form to look the way that it did. It's an interesting design, but I mean, it's kind of silly looking. Not really sure what was up with that, but I do kind of get it. I might be missing something, but I think I kind of get it. And techniques like puppets and animatronics were considered, but the decision was ultimately made just to make a full CGI Godzilla. Also, like, Minus One, Shin was made on a super modest budget, like under $9 million. I think Minus One was like 10 to 15, but that's crazy. I don't think it looks quite as good as Minus One, but it still looks great. And one more thing that I thought that was very clever was that the original Godzilla film was basically a metaphor for the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, famously. And Shin is more inspired by the Fukushima nuclear disaster from 2011. Really cool touch. I really like what they did with that. So I'm giving Shin Godzilla a 9 out of 10. This is an excellent Godzilla film, and it's one of the best I've seen so far. And again, it set the pace for Godzilla -1, which is my absolute favorite Godzilla film in the franchise. So, anyways, yeah, really cool. Check it out if you haven't, but if you're a Godzilla fan, you absolutely have. Cheers, guys. See you at the multiplex.